A bunch of people have asked me to share my application to the TIFF Lab following my podcast with Caleb Ryan. So here we go. Something that's relative to applying to any of these opportunities with an industry lab or market or delegation is I think you should always think of it as working on another draft of your project, another draft of your pitch. And a good example of that is actually you'll see in Film Freeway, which is the platform that TIFF has chosen for submissions, you'll see that I actually applied in 2021 and didn't get in. And then I applied for 2022 and did get it. So there's an element of iterative design that I think is valuable for your mindset and not seeing rejection as anything against you personally or your project. These are very competitive opportunities. The year that I got into, my understanding is they had 400 applications, 20 people get in, 10 from Canada, 10 international. So that's 5 out of 100 is 5% acceptance rate. Take it as an opportunity to refine your materials. And if you get in, that's great. If you don't, then your materials will be better for next time. All right. So first up, I think the biggest question I get asked is, what did my pitch video look like? Pitch videos are becoming more popular for a lot of these opportunities, I think for a couple of reasons. One, a 2-minute pitch video is much easier to watch than going through an entire Bible of materials. But I think for the TIFF Lab, what's more important about the pitch video is as much as they are accepting your project, ultimately, they're investing in you as a filmmaker. So I think a lot of people get caught up with spending the whole 2 minutes talking about their project, and they forget to talk about themselves, their artistic mission. Why do they make films? What inspires them? What informed this film? And my understanding with the TIFF Lab in particular is that's why they're selecting you. So as Caleb mentioned in his podcast, he did his presentation at the Window Factory where he worked tirelessly to raise the money to self-finance his film. Not only does that mise-en-scene sound very specific and cool, but what it really does is tell the lab who he is as a filmmaker, how hardworking, how dedicated he is, and I guess what's special about him. So I'm going to show you my pitch video, and then I'm going to go back and break down some of the things that you might not see in what went into making the video. So here we go.
Bonjour, hello. I'm Gavin Seal, a filmmaker from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. The working title for my project is Laughing with God. It's a dramatic feature film inspired by true events. It's a portrait of brotherhood through the lens of hereditary mental illness, and it's about the ripple effects caused by these diseases. The film follows Ali Singh, a comedian struggling with addiction who's tasked with taking care of his estranged brother Chetan Singh after Chetan turns up in a hospital following his latest suicide attempt. Reunited in the ICU, the siblings find each other at rock bottom, and Chetan convinces Ali to embark on a road trip together to a medical facility in search of legal approval for Chetan to participate in Switzerland's assisted suicide program. As they set out on their mission, each hoping to save the other from any more pain, they shed their stigmas, taboos, and secrets. The concept for the film started on one of many occasions that I'd called a mental health support line because my brother had tried to kill himself again. They dispatched the police and asked, "How are you doing?" I thought, "Why are you wasting our time talking about me?" I got plastered shortly after hanging up, and that's when I realized I needed help too. All of my work revolves around characters who don't feel like they have a voice, that no one is listening or cares. I also believe this is an important story to tell. It's the first I've written that's truly my own, but it's also a story that many other people live with too. As a Quebecois South Asian Canadian, I plan to do so from a fresh perspective that hasn't been seen or represented yet in film. Through this lab, I hope to learn from masters of the film industry about directing my first feature film, refining my voice, and I hope to develop my network of collaborators who can help me bring this script to screen. Of course, I also hope to catch some incredible films if there's time. In fact, it was a screening of All My Puny Sorrows at TIFF last year that inspired me to kick the development of this film into high gear. So thank you for that, and I invite you to watch and read my support materials for more about the project and my profile as a filmmaker. Thank you.
So there isn't one right way to do this. First, the thing I want to point out is how shitty this video is. There's no production value. I'm just in my co-working space. It's not like a great video, but I do think it's a really effective video in terms of communicating who I am as a person, as a filmmaker. It's a pretty tight elevator pitch, 30 seconds. It's not long. I don't get deep into the extended synopsis. I talk about some of the things that I'm attracted to with storytelling. I talk about the unique perspective I can bring. And then also I, tied it into a true story, which was seeing All My Puny Sorrows at TIFF, which speaks to why I'm applying to the TIFF Lab specifically. The other thing that I want to point out is I didn't do this all in one take. I think a lot of people believe that they have to do it all in one take. No, there are lots of cuts in here. Some of them are masked by tight edits, or I forget what the tool is in Premiere where it like matches to kind of cross dissolve without you noticing as much. So lots of edits in there. The thing I'm most proud of about this, and basically most pitch videos that I make, are the subtitles, or in this case, captions. A lot of people are going to be watching this on their phone. Maybe English isn't their first language. And so the captions allow my material to be more digestible to anyone, even if English is their first language, even if they are watching it on, full screen on a laptop. I think the other thing that's worth mentioning here is the captions also kind of distract a little bit from the cuts. So I think it helps mask those edits. And I for sure did, I don't know, 10 takes of this. Each take was probably 5, 7. I think the first take was like 8 minutes. And then as I got more comfortable with the material, it got tighter and tighter and tighter. But if I remember correctly, the take that I used was about 4 minutes. And then I chopped all the ums, the ahs, the pauses. And if I was getting too deep into one subject, I trimmed it down. I know Caleb's was one take, and he was like, oh, I didn't know I could cut. Why not? The only real constraint is that the video has to be 2 minutes. But I think it might have been 2 minutes, 5 seconds or something. The reason I say this is because the reason that constraint is there is so that they're not watching 10-minute videos. But if it's a little bit over and you're engaging them, I don't think they're going to disqualify you for being 2 minutes and 1 second over. So don't stress too much about getting it perfect. Don't stress too much about cleaning it up. Don't stress too much about production value. What I'm proud of is that I do think it captures who I am as a filmmaker, the film itself, and why I might be a good fit for this lab. It's also like, you should want to do this lab not just because it's prestigious, but because you're going to get something out of it. And so communicating what you're going to get out of it is also a really effective way of basically demonstrating product market fit, so to speak. Another thing worth pointing out, this is just shot on an iPhone. So you don't need to like rent a Ari Alexa to shoot your video. Again, they're focusing on you and what you will bring to the lab, what you will bring to the cohort, and what you'll get out of it. So don't stress about getting some sort of wild setup. I think the microphone too is actually the same headphones I'm wearing now. It's not that high production value, but I think it's pretty tight, effective, and efficient. The other thing that you can't see here, there's a window on the side, so I did shoot it during the day, so I'd be relatively well lit. The other thing you can't see is behind the iPhone, I actually had a monitor with my script. So I was reading, but I put the monitor far enough and the font big enough that hopefully you don't see my eyes scrolling. And under the desk, I actually have a mouse on my lap that I'm using to scroll across the screen. So I kind of built this really DIY teleprompter. So this isn't memorized by any means. Having said that, this is a pitch I practiced many times from other labs or simply from reworking the materials for grant applications. So I wasn't unfamiliar with it. This wasn't the first time I was reading it. But this is by no means one take. This is by no means memorized. So obviously I said, bonjour, hello. Right from the top, I'm identifying that I'm Quebecois. I think a really efficient way of demonstrating my uniqueness as a candidate. I think for the TIFF Filmmaker Lab, everything is a feature film, but generally it's a really great practice, whether you're pitching in video, pitching online, pitching in written materials, whatever, you always right away want to tell them what kind of format it is. More important if you're at, let's say, a market where some buyers, sellers, decision makers, partners, they might not be looking for films. They might be looking for series. So by saying right off the top, it's a dramatic feature film or it's a sitcom, you're really helping ensure alignment with the person you're speaking to if they're aligned. If they're not aligned, that's fine too. Everyone has their interests. Everyone has what they're looking for. In this case, they're looking for feature film. So you don't want any confusion about the project. And obviously, I mentioned the genre. And I mentioned that's inspired by true events. And so by stating inspired by true events, I'm letting the jury know that this is a very personal film, which I think is important to them. I think most of the filmmakers there had very personal films. No one's pitching Armageddon. This again is kind of the artistic statement. It's a theme. It's kind of the why. With a lot of these, we talk about the who, what, when, where, why. I've kind of set up the who, kind of set up the what, but this is the why, and also why it's timely. So not only am I talking about the film, we know it's inspired by true events. My brother did ask me to take him to Switzerland to participate in a euthanasia program. Then I'm also expressing my struggles with substance abuse as a result of not having the tools that I needed to cope and kind of manage that situation. and always say thank you at the end. Always thank people for their time. What's important about inviting to read the support materials is actually tracking back to what is the purpose of this particular asset in the entire package of marketing collateral. You are submitting a long synopsis. You are submitting director's intentions. You are submitting more material. So I think what kind of trips people up a lot is the question, what is the video pitched for? Which I talked about a little bit. But really, that's probably the question you should ask yourself when preparing for this video. I would also recommend prep all the written materials ahead of time, so the video is the last thing you do, so you're less stressed out about it. I think a lot of people jump to the video and get stressed out, and then the written materials end up being left to the last minute. By submitting all the pitch materials, it'll allow you to refresh yourself on what is available there, so that the video can kind of be an amuse-bouche that kind of frames all the other materials while not being redundant. Let's get on to the other materials. That's what I called it. Gavin Seal, TIFF Filmmaker Lab 2022. Logline, a comedian struggling with addiction is reunited with his estranged brother when a mental health crisis brings them together one last time. Pretty proud of that logline. A lot of drama there. I think the one last time is particularly strong. That leaves the audience on a bit of a cliffhanger. Director's biography. I'm an award-winning filmmaker, just like everyone else. Work has been licensed by CBC, seen at festivals. I'm definitely trying to demonstrate a certain level of professionalism by mentioning that films like Case Clause is licensed by CBC, and my films have screened at festivals that should be recognizable to the TIFF jury. Fantasia, Real World, most of them are based in Toronto, so that's something to consider. And then I mentioned, working on Iterative program, which was Emmy nominated and CSA nominated, Writers Guild of Canada award. That was a prize. I probably should have said prize instead of award. Yada, yada, yada. Yeah, if I remember correctly, you do have to have had credit on a feature film, which I have as a line producer at this time. I think sometimes people get caught up on believing that they have to check a very rigid box based on their interpretation of the criteria. I think that might have been an example of a box that technically I checked because I had a credit on a feature film, but it might not have been what would have been expected by a lot of applicants, like having directed a feature film. The other thing is I've produced a lot of series, including series for Barbie and Hot Wheels and Fisher Price and Halo. So I might have also positioned my equivalent experience as a line producer on a feature and on series as being equivalent. So that's something to think about too, in reading between the lines, between why there is criteria and what it really means. Because I think a lot of directors, I'd say I'm not eligible because I didn't direct a feature film. But the reason that criteria is usually there is to ensure that the, not necessarily caliber, but the experience level of the participants is at a certain level. At the same time, like Caleb and I talked about in that podcast, people are at very different, places in their careers. It's not a straight line. And I think what they are trying to do really is build a cohort who are not only going to learn from the guests, but learn from each other. Hopefully, with this channel in general, there's a general vibe of never disqualify yourself. Like I said, if you don't think you're eligible, apply. Let them filter you out. And if they do, apply next year with what is now a stronger application and stronger materials. You'll see here some materials from my press kit, a couple of clippings from when it was published in this case, it was Québécois, which is a Québécois industry magazine. And then the director's statement, you'll see more about the project, the why me, why now. While mental health is currently a hot topic of conversation, families like mine have yet to be represented on film. I believe there's an underserved audience in the market here coming from a family of Québécois, South Asian, and Canadian heritage. I believe this story has the potential to speak a universal truth through the individual struggles of these characters. Given my personal connection to the material, I also believe I'll be able to imbue this film with the necessary sensitivity to subject matter. The film will be entrenched in the examination of mental health from multiple perspectives, and the film will evoke the feelings, hurdles, and hardships of its subjects while avoiding sensationalism. What I mean there is that it's not uncommon for films about mental health to be driven by moments of drama that are around self-harm and in a way kind of sensationalizes or even glorifies self-harm. So that's what I'm trying to address there, but that'll all be done tastefully and we won't witness characters self-harming or suffering to turn that type of behavior into spectacle. The actions of these characters will be naturalistic. There'll be a light touch and sweetness in the relationships with moments of levity stemming from the honest reality of what it's like to live like this for a lifetime, not just the first time or the last time that a crisis event occurs. What I mean by that is often It's almost like this is the first time characters are experiencing this. And for the arc that I'm going for with the subject of euthanasia, it's not realistic that it would be the first time. Everyone wants to believe that if they were faced with these situations, they would make the right choices, but the reality is there's no such thing. Everything's gray. This film will reflect how these complicated emotions feel, look, and manifest differently to different people. I'm not going to get into the specifics of the story and script that reflect this, but it's a road trip movie essentially where they meet many characters along the way. In many ways, it's a reinterpretation of It's a Wonderful Life. But, those angels are kind of just people from their family and friends who all have kind of a different perspective on what is the best way for him to support his brother, what is helping, what is hurting. So we'll explore that conversation through this cast of characters. I hope this film will help people who have also been affected by these diseases feel seen and heard by this truthful perspective and find peace in their journeys through their own survivor guilt via the shared experience of the story. These circumstances are complex, isolating, and taboo, and experiences like these are often indescribable. They need the shared language of cinema to bridge the gap between reality, medicine, and emotion. Project Genesis. This is the most ambitious project I've tackled to date, and I truly believe we're at the stage of our artistic seed that this program is meant to water. It is currently in development with Lotus Pictures, and with the support of your tribe of industry mentors, feedback, and guidance, together we have the potential to connect with many people on an important subject. This is also the first project that has been so personal. It is my most intimate, honest work, and the truest expression of my artistic voice so far, which makes me the most vulnerable to blind spots. This means I'll need as much help as possible solving for these weaknesses with third-party perspectives and objective mentorship. Please know that I am highly coachable, open to learning how to grow to the next stage of my artistic career, and ready to do the work necessary to achieve it with the utmost gratitude for your time and expertise. Inspiration. Cops, so to speak. Sources of inspiration include Michael McGowan's examination of intergenerational trauma and sisterhood in All My Puny Sorrows, Josh Maughan's reflection on the burden of care in James White, and Kenneth Lonergan's exploration of survivor's guilt in Manchester by the Sea. These films masterfully use the language of cinema to expand the conversation around affliction beyond the individual directly affected and include the surrounding community of loved ones and caregivers who share this experience. Despite the weight of the material, these films are still grounded in kindness, love, and compassion. So that's my application. The main thing, if you've gotten this far, is don't filter yourself out. Apply. If they filter you out, you have a strong application to build on next year or for another opportunity. And hopefully your project has been refined in the process and polished. So don't be discouraged. Getting into things like this are not a measure of merit or self-worth or, the value of your project. It's just part of the process. Take it as an opportunity to have a deadline. We're all artists and we struggle with setting our own deadlines. Opportunities like this are like, okay, this application's due this date. I get to refine my materials. I get to work on it. And I would say that's the best thing to take any of these opportunities as a forced opportunity to do another draft on your materials. Hope that's helpful.